I'm on. Yeah, we're good? Yeah. All right. Thank you everyone so much for being here to celebrate and honor Kevin. We have so many wonderful faces in person, and we also have lots of wonderful people with us on Zoom. So if everyone who's sitting wants to wave to that camera that's in the corner there, and all the Zoom people can wave. This is, we can all be together. It's lovely. So my name is Celia Beasley, and I have been best friends with Sabine since 6th grade. And so I got to have Kevin in my life for that amount of time, which was very special. And one of my first memories of Kevin was I would be going over to Sabine's house for a sleepover or whatever, and we would sit down at dinner, and I would be unable to eat because I was laughing the entire time at all of the little jokes that Kevin would just say in the corner under his breath. I would just be like shaking with laughter the whole time because he was hilarious. And I'm sure many of you have had that experience as well. So I got to know Kevin when I was much younger. And then as I grew up and we became older and went to college and did all of those things, he was always so loving and supportive and just interested in what we were doing. And when I had my kids, who were very conveniently born within months and weeks, respectively, of Mila and Lena Rose, Loic and Eloise here, Sabine and I planned that. We really had a whole plan starting in 6th grade. But we would go to Middlefield Road to see Janet and Kevin when Sabine and the girls were in town. And I think Kevin was very happy to have a child there who was as passionate about cars as he was, my son Loic. And they would spend hours in the garage, and my son would just ask, what's this and what's this? And Kevin would just answer all of his questions, and even a few times took him on a ride in the Ferrari on Grizzly Peak Boulevard. I mean, there's not a lot of kids, under 10 who can say that. So it was pretty amazing. And even later on, when Loic would have big philosophical questions such as, which is better, a Bentley or a Ferrari? Well, I was like, you know who to call. So we called Kevin, and he answered very diplomatically, the whole thing about depends on what you're looking for. But we were like, ultimately, I think the Ferrari. It's pretty safe to say that's what we prefer. So that I'm always wanted to share those memories that I have of Kevin, and we have other people here who will be sharing their memories as well. And we also have a few people via Zoom who will be doing it too. So just a reminder for those of us who are here, we'll be having this moment where we're all sharing our thoughts. And then at about when we're finished with that, if people want to, who are not listed to speak, have some things that they want to share, then that's the time to do that. And then we'll be wrapping up the Zoom, and then we'll have a little lunch in here and out in the courtyard. So, and I also want to remind people to please sign the guest book after. And also just really wanted to thank everyone who helped put this amazing event together. The uncles, Dave and Phil, who took care of all of the Zoom extravaganza, and Amy, who helped coordinate all the food. It was really so helpful. And Linda, who got all of the rentals and all the decorations and everything. It's just been really so wonderful. So thank you to everyone who contributed. And the first person who will speak is Sabine.
Okay, so I'm going to try to say a few words, but before I do, I would really like to thank everybody for being here, everybody who's here physically, everybody who's here on Zoom. There's people who've flown in from out of town, so we're very grateful. My mom, my sister, and my daughters and I have been extremely grateful for and just overwhelmed by the huge outpouring of love and support we've received from all of you, so thank you. Again, on behalf of my sister and my mom, I'd like to say a big thank you to my uncles Dave and Phil for helping set up this whole Zoom situation, to my cousins Amy and Kevin for helping with the food, to my wonderful friend Celia for helping with everything, and to my mom's friend Linda, who helped with all of the beautiful flowers that you see on the tables, all of the chairs and tables. And she wants to remind everybody that you are welcome to take these flowers home with the pots. And she says she's not responsible for the fact that there's no drainage under the pots, correct? Okay, so thank you so much to all of you for your help. Dear Dad, everyone probably knows that we were last hanging out with you in Paris in late October. We celebrated your 79th birthday and you seemed great. And then we flew home on December 18th for what we thought was a kidney and liver infection. 6 short days later, you died peacefully at home. I still have trouble talking about you in the past, and I'm not sure how to talk about you, so I will talk to you. There are so many things I'm holding on to and that you have passed on to me and to us. When we were little, I remember taking the car out and driving what I thought was aimlessly. We called it getting lost. Maybe that was you infusing love of travel into us from an early age. I remember feeling like we were on an adventure, and I remember feeling an infinite sense of possibility. When we were younger and you traveled a lot for work, and because you were always so humble and so modest, we suspected you were secretly working for the FBI. You never talked about your hundreds of published articles in journals or any of your honors and awards. I guess then either your colleagues are here, we finally believe that you genuinely were an astrophysicist. I'm pretty sure that the reason I walk so fast is from having to keep up with your brisk pace and long legs when I was a little girl. Later on, when I was in high school, we bonded over our shared love of math. You'd help me with my trig and calculus homework. In college, you helped me set up my first personal computer and printer in my dorm room, and every once in a while, I'd still call you to work on a particularly challenging math problem. Later, when I was teaching, you came to speak to my students. Everyone thinks Allison and I got the teaching gene from the Strauss side of the family. And while there's probably a lot from that side, there was no one like you to explain complex math and astrophysicists to teenagers and often even younger students. You made it fascinating, accessible, and fun without ever dumbing it down. Later still, when you became a grandpa, you came alive in that role and started planting seeds in Mila and Lena Rose, whether this was through reading with them, traveling with them, or your quiet presence in what was formerly your living room. You loved photography and photographing the things you loved, cars, your trips, your family. Here you are trying to take a photo of your granddaughters and getting sucked into the ambient chaos again. You loved cars, looking at them, driving them, and taking them apart, and sharing your love of cars. You loved going to concerts. You loved travel and sharing your love of travel. In fact, you loved a lot of things and were exceptionally good at them. We thought you were an FBI agent because that seemed plausible, but you could have also been a photographer, a chef, a sommelier, or a mechanic, among other things. Whatever you did, whether this was working on your train set, making a recipe, or taking apart your cars, you always did it outstandingly well with your laser sharp focus, commitment, and patience. You're the only person I know who read through the entire Photoshop manual. And you were always the person all of us went to when we had a question about anything. Trips with you were always amazing. Here's a picture from when we went to Mexico when I was in 6th grade. We went for your work where we all got to see an eclipse. And then in Indonesia, where you, Mom, and Allison met me on my trip around the world. On trips, you famously always had everything ready ahead of time, right down to the envelopes for tips you would give out to the people who helped. There you were infusing the little seeds that would grow into my hyper-organization. Your crazy planning ahead never made anything less fun, though it did provide good opportunities for Allison and me to make fun of you. One of the best trips we ever took was when we got to go to Jordan, and you could share your love of traveling with your granddaughters. You always wanted them to be happy, whether that meant installing an oversized trampoline in the garden, populating the house with Playmobiles at every visit, many of which we suspected were for you, making them baby chinos for breakfast, or taking them to Disneyland. We had to ban you from going to Five Little Monkeys, a toy store, when the girls were younger. We had to put a limit on your screen time with them, or you would sit and watch movies with them until all hours of the night. You inaugurated traditions like Taco Tuesday and Pizza Thursday, and were generally known as the yes man around these parts. As in, Grandpa, can we have a pony? Yes. Mila and Lena Rose also got the sense of boundless possibility and fun with you. Birthdays would have always been wildly unreasonable if we'd left them up to you. Here's a recent exchange from Mila's 13th birthday present discussion. We thought she might like an electric keyboard. So here is the discussion that ensued. Okay. Notice the price tag on that. When I explained that we were not buying Mila a $2,700 guitar for her birthday, but rather that we had this in mind, and did you and Mom want to contribute? You replied, all right. For Lena Rose's last birthday, you asked me to send you a list of things she might like, which I did. Upon receiving the long list of items you could choose from, you replied, for my recent birthdays, I always received a card like these, which showed your love and your dry sense of humor. The other day, you would have been so proud of Lena Rose's and Mila's last report cards. You would have laughed with your hearty chuckle at Mila's story about a sleepover in an absolute mansion. I had a story from work about a family missing a day of school because they had to change their plane ticket due to needing to get a ticket for their dog. You would have gotten a kick out of that too. Both girls seem to share your love of photography, and Mila has developed a fascination for the sky, the stars, the moon. Mila takes pictures of the sky almost every day and says you are looking down at us. When the sky is looking amazing, she says, I think Grampy made it to heaven. I know you don't believe in heaven, being a scientist and all, but we like to imagine you looking down and being there with us somehow. Every time we see a Ferrari or a Corvette, Lena Rose says, that's Grampy saying hi to us. The other day I said to the girls, getting Lucky, our puppy, was the best decision of 2021. And Mila said, no, flying home for Christmas to see Grampy was. She's right. You've left a giant Grampy-shaped hole in our lives and hearts. You left us far too quickly and too soon. I still cannot quite believe that you are gone. But you've also left us with little bits of you everywhere, and that's what we'll hang on to. I miss you so much, Daddy, and I think of you every day. Thank you for sharing your love of math with me, for teaching us all how to travel, for showing us how to be infinitely accepting, for modeling such humility, for showing us that you could be outstandingly smart and still love reality TV, that you could be a scientist but also a cook, for the sense of possibility, for your quiet wit and intelligence, for being the smartest, most generous, funniest, and best dad, Grampy, and rocket scientist to our family. Wherever you are, I hope that you are surrounded by Ferraris and Corvettes, good wine, good food, and great music.
All right, now it's Lena Rose's turn.
First of all, I'd like to say that what I'm wearing represents what I felt and what I still feel. Like the red, English, happiness, the blue, sadness, and the black, grief. And my bubble tea earrings that represent everything that shaped up together. And the bovas, all the obstacles that happened. So I'm sure that we've all had some good memories with him. Some of us by marriage, others by riding in a Ferrari to go to camp or just to have a ride. Some of us knew him as a father, a grandfather, a husband, a cousin, a friend, or a neighbor, an uncle. So let's all take a deep breath and think about as much memories as you can. You can close your eyes to think about it if you want. Sometimes I think he visits me, like when I see a Ferrari or a train. Sometimes even an old man that doesn't look like him, but has the same big smile he would wear when he saw us. Some things that I miss about him are his funny, mysterious smile and his laugh. Also his or his rough and hand-faced pet, or the baby chinos. And even sometimes a random, hey, do you guys want to go to the movies? Okay, let's go. I miss being able to sit in his lap or having to walk 10 baby steps to catch up to his regular steps. Now I'm going to read a letter that I wrote for him last baby vacation.
You're right.
Dear Grandpa, I love you so much. Nothing could ever stop that. You're the best grandpa that everyone would have wanted, but luckily I got you. This letter is to tell you how much I love you. By the way, I love you, if you had forgotten. Here are the reasons of why I love you. By the way, I could go on for a long time, but this is the short version. You're fun, you're generous, you're lovable, you're caring, you're wonderful, you're sweet, you're inspirational, you're nerdy, you're amazing, you're cute, you're extremely smart. You're the best grandpa. You're probably the best father and husband, but I don't know. I'm only your granddaughter. Losing you will be one of the worst things in my life. But the 10 years that I've known you have been the best. Love. And the last thing I'm going to share is a poem of my grandpa. He was silly, he was kind, he was lovely. He was nerdy, but I didn't mind. The Ferraris and all those cars, at least we were lucky because he was ours.
And now we'll hear from Kevin's oldest granddaughter, Mila.
Hi everyone, I'm Kevin's eldest granddaughter, Mila. I don't really know how to say this, so I'm going to talk to him. Dear Grandpa, I know that you hated being the center of attention, so I'll try to make this short. You were possibly the nicest, most wonderful person I knew. The more I hear people talk about you and what a kind person you were, the more I realize how incredibly lucky I am to be your granddaughter. I love you so much, and the fact that I don't get to see your face in real life anymore hurts my heart. You were my best friend, and I will keep loving you until the end. You never talked about yourself, and you were way too modest. I know that for a fact. I learned after your passing away that you were the main investigator for the solar and cosmic gamma ray burst experiment aboard the Ulysses spacecraft, which I still don't really understand. And that you had made a memorable discovery of the transient repeating burst sources, which are now accepted by the astrophysical community as magnetar. And that in addition to that, you received many honors and awards, including multiple awards from NASA, which shocked me, but not really, as I know that you are a very brilliant man. I'm aware of the fact that you are a very passionate person and that age didn't stop you from showing up at your lab, where you studied the sky, which fascinates us both. It hurts me to have to give your Ferrari and your Porsche away, as I know how cool you thought those were. You were the best person I knew, and I remember that a couple years back, we went to the garden with your telescope and you pointed it at the moon. And that's when I knew that I wanted to follow your steps and become an astrophysicist, because I thought that it was awesome and I wanted to make you proud. I wish I still could. I know that you weren't the most sociable guy, but people cared about you. I know that everyone here did, and that already seems like a lot. And even though you didn't have the best childhood, you still spread love, and I hope that you know that you were brave. Now that you are gone, I will miss your forehead rubs that you gave so lovingly, looking at the stars with you at unreasonably late times, occasionally going to your lab and thinking I was so cool when people saw me walking down the hallways with you. I will miss you backing up every single argument you have with scientific evidence, which I don't even think I'll ever fully understand. I'll miss your eyes, which I still claim to be green, even though everyone else said they were brown. I'll never forget the moments we had together. For example, when you came to school on the day of the solar eclipse and explained everything to my 4th grade class, and even brought special glasses so that we could see it properly. I'll miss the yes man that you were, and I hope that when I talk to the sky, you can hear me, and I hope that I can follow your steps and become an astrophysicist as well. I know that you loved me so much, maybe more than I deserved at times, but you made me the happiest granddaughter there could ever be. I will forever remember that because during your last days, when all you could say was yes and yeah, when I said I love you before going to sleep, you made the effort to reply with I love you too. I will never forget you and what you did for me. I love you so much, and I hope that you are aware of that. You were the best grandpa anyone could ever have, and I'm so happy that you are mine. Thank you.
And now we'll be hearing from Dave, Kevin's brother-in-law.
Janet's the best sister anybody could ever have. She's just wonderful and sweet and kind and smart. But along with that, there's a fringe benefit, which is Kevin became my brother-in-law in 1969. So anyway, what good is a brother-in-law? Well, I think that kind of the usual cliche about brothers-in-law is that you borrow stuff from them. And that happened over the years occasionally, weed whackers and lenses and, things like that. But it turned out that there were lots of other really, really cool things about Kevin. And it turned out that as a result of Janet and Kevin finding each other, he was a brother-in-law in my life for over 50 years. I'm not sure when I first met Kevin. I think it was in maybe 1967 at your apartment a couple of times. But some of you might be shocked to know that in 1968, we were in a class together. And it's probably, for anybody who knows Kevin and might know me, that we really didn't have a lot academically in common. We were in a French class. It was French 4 in a small classroom in Dwinell Hall in 1968. And so I had the opportunity to sit next to her across from Kevin and talk before and after class. And, that's really when we got to know each other. And I would also add, just kind of as a footnote, that was probably the first and only time that we were at the same level academically in anything. But that was a great experience. And of course, that's, when I began to learn what you've been hearing from his daughters, granddaughters, and probably everybody else, that, he's incredibly brilliant, kind, sweet, thoughtful, and incredibly modest person. So I'm just going to repeat those same words. At their house, at Janet and Kevin's house on Middlefield, not long ago, I was sitting with Janet, and there in front of me was Kevin's photo computer, which is tucked under a desk. And that's the desk where he did all his photographic work. He was quite an expert in Photoshop, and he did a lot with photography, pretty much for all of the time period that I knew him. And I asked Janet if it was okay if I looked through his photos. And so I got permission, and I got onto his computer, and it was very logically arranged. Of course, the root folder was called Photos. And with a couple of clicks in Windows, I saw the number 43,414. So there were 43,000 photos for me to look through. And obviously, I'm not going to show them all to you, but some of those photos, they weren't all just photos taken by Kevin, although the overwhelming majority of them were taken by Kevin. But there were some accumulated that were pictures of Kevin. At the time I met Kevin, this is what Kevin looked like in in that time period. you know, and he looked like sort of the rock stars of the time, you know, Country Joe and the Fish and, you know, Jefferson Airplane and so on, that he would have fit right in. And of course, it turned out that he really was a rock star. I mean, you know, in so many ways. Another thing about Kevin that really struck me in particular, and this is just, I don't know, it was also mentioned by Myla and Lena Rose. And I, you know, I had written all this out, but I, of course, completely lost where I am. But completely separate from his career as a professional scientist, he was an amateur astronomer. And by that, I mean the sort of original meaning of the word amateur, which is, you know, the root is in love, that he loved the sky, he loved the moon, he loved the constellations, all of that kind of stuff. And there were some photographs that really represented that. So this, for example, you know, is a picture that basically, you know, sort of a classic kind of a picture that amateur astronomers like to take. And you point a camera at the sky, you set it for a very long exposure. And what you're watching here is a rotation of the Earth. And, you know, the sort of fundamental things about the sky, the stars and the constellations, and, you know, of course, he knew all of that. He knew all of the constellations of the zodiac and all of the other constellations and the names of lots and lots and lots of stars. And he knew, you know, the names of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus, and there are 27 moons of Uranus, and I'm sure he knew all the names of all of them. They're named after Shakespeare characters. And, you know, another example, this is a picture of a total lunar eclipse. And this one is fairly recent. You know, stuff like that still fascinated him and really has little to nothing to do with gamma ray bursts and magnetars. I mean, this is amateur science. And he was a subscriber to Sky and Telescope, which is sort of the Bible of amateur astronomers. And he wrote many articles for Sky and Telescope that, you know, that's not where academic astrophysical research goes. That's where really, you know, sort of sophisticated, hardcore amateur stuff goes. And I just thought that that was a remarkable juxtaposition. And this is a picture, in the picture you can see his telescope. This is, you know, again, this is, you know, an 8-inch optical telescope. It has nothing to do with magnetars or gamma rays. That has to do with looking at the sky and going, wow, you know, that's what that's for. So here's some pictures of Kevin that I found on the computer, and these are you know, pretty fun. I'm you know, I'm not going to make any comments. I'm just going to flip through these as sort of, you know, days in the life of Kevin. And I'll go fast because there's a lot of pictures here, but I don't want to. Let me slow down. That's okay. This is his confirmation, as I understand it, and Kevin is here. And don't worry, I blew that up. And you know, here's some more early action with a view camera here with that looks like a 4x5, pretty fun camera. There's that picture again. Of course, his beloved mom showed up, and Anitra showed up in a bunch of pictures. This is sort of a Carnaby Street look, I think, you know. Where was that? Toulouse, yeah. And another one of Anitra. And these are in no particular sequence. I just, you know, these are, remember, a very small sample of 43,414 pictures. This is, I'm pretty sure that was a passport. I labeled it passport selfie. When I looked at that, I said, oh, that screams passport. You know? This one, I don't know what explanation goes with that one. Good look there. He had a fabulous mustache for some parts of his life. Espresso was a big deal to Kevin. And yeah, that's a picture I took about 10 years ago. Car. What's this? What's the story on this? Does it... Oh, okay. Oh, so that was a Photoshop thing, or I don't know. Oh, it's makeup. Oh, okay. I didn't know. Oh, it's on his eyelids. Oh, I see. Okay, got it. Okay. This one is, you know, X-rated, you know, so. And more espresso. You know, he's a highly decorated Cub Scout, by the way. Go back to that. No, where do you want to go? Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Now, I didn't know who Nell was. Okay, cars. Of course, cars was a really big deal in Kevin's life. He knew everything about cars. He was very interested in Formula One. Of course, he owned various cars. He restored cars. He was an expert mechanic. He could do anything on a car. He restored a couple of Alfa Romeos in the garage. Now is a Corvette Z6 and a Ferrari F430. Each of them have 500 horsepower, go 200 miles an hour. So, and he drove them from Middlefield Road to the Space Sciences Lab, which is about 1 mile. And at 200 miles an hour, that's a pretty short trip. He took a lot of photographs of cars, and again, there are thousands of them. I just picked a few that I thought were kind of extraordinary in various ways. And again, I have to go kind of slow here, but now this picture needs a little explanation. I studied this picture, and I can tell you exactly how this picture is made. This is his Ferrari F430. He's driving it, and he's got a camera in his hand, and he's leaning against the car, and it's an exposure of about 0.6 of a second, and shot with a wide angle, and it makes for a very interesting picture, you know. And I hope, you know, he was going like 5 miles an hour when he did this, but who knows? Yeah. Just other beautiful pictures. This is Maserati and, you know, Formula One cars. I don't know what this is, but it looks like it's French. There's a tricolor on it. And stock car racing. Even a Formula One fan watches stock cars sometimes. Another Ferrari, old cars, you know, lots of fooling around in Photoshop, which he was quite an expert at. Beautiful pictures of cars. And then there's this and that, you know. Travel. That was another really big deal in their family's life. They traveled everywhere. And of course, he did a lot of travel on business for, you know, what we used to air quote, we used to say, oh, he's going to a meeting, you know, because they would go to these exotic, incredible places and, you know, supposedly talk about astrophysics, but they just everywhere. And so this is a little hard to read, but this is part of the directory structure on the disk drive where all his photos live. And you can just see the list here. I won't read them all to you, but this is just all over the world over a very long period of time. Travel. So both for fun and for work, travel was just a very major theme. And a few travel pictures, just a very few, because there are, again, thousands and thousands of them. I thought these were, you know, interesting or beautiful, or, you know, said something about what it was that Kevin pointed his camera at. I like that one. You check out Janet's hairdo there. That's a period piece right there. And you know, these restored cars in Cuba. I'm sure that was in Cuba. I don't know where that was. Is that a cheetah? I guess it is. Yeah. This one's kind of funny. So there is a town in France with this name. And if you look very closely at this picture, it's a little blurry, but you can see their fingers. Yeah, nice picture. You want to go back to this one? It's funny. There's Allison with a crocodile or something, yeah. Oh, a caiman, yeah, okay. So you were in the Amazon something.
He got bit, but I miraculously did.
Good job. Yeah. This, I thought that was an incredible shot there. You notice there's some prey in the jaws of this canid, whatever it is. That's nice too. And there's a cat in the lap of this Buddha. Where was that, in Thailand? Yeah, that's a good one. This is the Machu Picchu, but it's not the typical shot that somebody takes at Machu Picchu. This is the zigzag switchback road that leads the little bus that you take up to the top of Machu Picchu. That kind of turns sideways. Very interesting point of view. And some other nice ones, but there's that. There we go again with that guy. And of course, you know, wine. Kevin was a wine expert. He could have been a sommelier, and in fact, I don't know when that one was taken. Was that on the same trip to Bordeaux in 1978? Yeah, I went with them to Bordeaux in 1978. It was a wonderful trip. That's when I decided to get more involved. Yes, and Sabine carried on and was thrown out of a lot of Michelin star restaurants on that trip. Her behavior has gotten a little better since then, a little bit. Anyway, a few travel pictures. Okay, the other thing was happenings, and happenings was the category on the computer, you know, under which were visits, you know, Aretha Franklin, Rolling Stones, you know, demonstrations at Berkeley, the human being, and so on and so forth. So I'll show you a few of those because I don't want to take up too much time here. So this was on the Berkeley campus in July. I don't know whether it was a rock concert or a political protest, but usually they were indistinguishable and sort of the same thing, you know. And of course, there's some dangerous radicals there if you look closely. That's somebody we know. That's Janet. That's Janet. And who's that? Allen Ginsberg. Very good. Okay, who can identify this guy? Timothy Leary. That's right. So, and this was at the 67 Summer of Love. It was called The Human Being, and it was a big thing. And people like Timothy Leary and Allen Ginsberg, you know, were part of the scene then. This is a Steppenwolf concert. So Kevin was taking pictures of this stuff, you know, for a long time. Rolling Stones 2013, and you know, he spent some significant money to get up front in these concerts, and so he could take these pictures. And the pictures are fantastic, you know. I mean, they should be in you know, Rolling Stone magazine or something. This is from a 2013 concert. Just really, really cool photos. Capturing the lighting and stuff, which is, you know, hard to do. Speaking as a photographer, that these kind of pictures are difficult. And that's Aretha. It was a different concert, 2015. More Rolling Stones in 2019, so that's very recent. And then, of course, family. Family was just huge. That was the biggest topic of all, and there were more photos of family than anything. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures of Sabine, Allison, Mila, Lena Rose, and, you know, other members of the more extended family. And that, you know, I think it just represents how important that really was to Kevin. Sorry? Oh, okay. We'll go slow. That's a really sweet picture that's sitting, you can tell that was taken by a pro. Yeah. You know, you can tell, you can see the catch lights in the eyeballs from the lighting. Yeah, you can do that. I love this. So I don't know if everybody knows the story about this, but this is the star right here, and the supporting cast, Natalie Portman. So we have a movie star in the room. Autographs. Yeah. You know where to go. This was the poster. That was a poster for that movie. They always put the star in front, supporting actress in the back. There's Janet in the trunk. That was flipped around too, yeah. That one's upside down. So, and more Sissy. The girls. And then, again, I have to remind you, there are thousands of these pictures. So, there's a very arbitrary selection. Very sweet picture. Who wants to explain?
I wish I could.
I think we know whose hair that is anyway, Yeah. Sweet picture. Yeah, now what's the deal here? A raisin. Okay. That's a nice one. A dancer. Dancers in. Yeah, it does. Yeah, I get confused at that age. It really look like twins. And then he collected, school pictures and put them together in a matrix like this. Pretty cool. You saw that one. I don't know. Is that the tech? Yeah. And then it's Janet's. Is that a Cohiba? Yeah, is it a Cohiba? That's what I remember. Okay. Cohiba is a very fancy Cuban cigar. That Yeah. This too, I think. That's Anitra, of course. Another one. For those of you that don't know, this is don't dump your garbage here. Yeah. There were a lot of this sort of genre of sort of ironic, weird signs and things like that. There were quite a few of them, and that was lucky. So that'll sort of end that category. Anyway, a tiny sample. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Dave, for sharing those. That was amazing. So we have two more speakers. They are joining us via the power of the internet. The first person is Peter.
So we all know how bright Kevin was. So Anitra and my father were brother and sister, and they were very close. So when we were growing up, the two families were together often. Either we went to their house or they came to our house. So Kevin's grandfather Eli died in the 30s, and Katie and Anitra and Kevin lived together for a long time. And it really wasn't obvious to me for a long time, but Anitra was also brilliant. She had a really high IQ as well. And she also didn't flaunt it. I called her once when she was 90 years old. And I said, I was proud of my vocabulary. And she immediately named 6 words that I had never heard of before in my life at 90 years old, just right off the top of her head. So she was also very smart, very soft-spoken, never bragged about anything. So my first memory of Kevin is 1946. You all remember 1946. I was 6 years old. Kevin was 4. We were living just north of New York City. And so we went over to Kevin's house often, or they came over to our house. So this one time my father said he was going over and he was going to take stitches out of Kevin's eyebrow. So we went over there and he took the stitches out, and I asked Kevin if it hurt. And he said no. Very quiet and soft-spoken. I never heard him raise his voice. And so the 3 of them were living together, and I never heard Kevin complain about it. Somebody said about his childhood If he was unhappy, I never knew it. We got together all the time. He didn't say if he was unhappy, he never indicated it. By 1949, we moved out to the West Coast. So our family moved out, and Katie and Nitra and Kevin moved out as well. So we often went over to his house, or he came over to our house. And Nitra and my father worked in our house at many weekends on doing house repair. And Kevin came along. It's not his house, but he went along with all the house repair. My father was very much into that. If you broke a pane of glass, he didn't have someone else fix it. We went down the hill, and Kevin came along, and he showed all of us how you do house repair, putting a new pane of glass, everything except electricity, no electricity. And Kevin, you're no surprise to anybody, right? He was an eager learner. Whatever there was, he was paying attention to learn how you do house repair of all different kinds of things, and never complained about doing repairs on someone else's house. He just pitched in and did his share. So they had, Katie and Nitra and Kevin had a house on Virginia Street in Berkeley, starting in 1949. Sometime before Kevin was a teenager, I don't remember the exact year, he said, "Pete, come here, I want to show you something." So I followed him into the kitchen, and he had created by himself a jar of cold cream. Young people will not know what cold cream is. I think it was a forerunner of hand lotions, but that's what you had in those days, cold cream, and he made his own jar of it. The next thing I remember, which is sort of fascinating about him, is in the early 1960s, some people remember when you had a television set, you had 3 channels. You had channel 4, channel 5, and channel 7. That was it. And if you wanted to change the television, you got up and walked across to him to change the channel, or change the vertical or horizontal or the color. So I was visiting Kevin in his apartment one day, and he said, "Look at this, take a look." And he had created what he called a blab off. He hooked up some wires to the television, and you could shut off. We all really didn't like the ads. You could shut off the ads. And I said, "Kevin, you could get a patent on this, and you could become a thousandaire." And he said no. And I knew if Kevin said no, that was the end of the discussion. There's no point in talking about it anymore. And I remember one more thing that's interesting. Like others, I tried to get out of him what he was doing. And we ate lunch once a month for a long time before, in the before days. And one day I got out of him, he said, well, when NASA put things up there, many people would apply for what kind of experiment you could put up there. And I'm gathering it was kind of hard to get something in. We know now if Kevin wanted something in, there's a good chance he could get it, partially because he had such great ideas. So he did admit to me that he came up with this idea that the sun had a North Pole and a South Pole. And he wanted to prove it. So he recommended to NASA, have the satellite fly completely around the sun. And that way they could prove if there was a North Pole and a South Pole. And he said, in fact, there was a North Pole and a South Pole. And I asked him if there's any snow on the North Pole, but he didn't think that was so funny. So that's all I could get out of him in terms of, I'm very interested in astrophysics. I know about 1/10,000th of what he would know, but he, as everybody else found, he wouldn't say very much about it. So we ate lunch for a long time. And one time Janet showed up and we had a nice lunch together. We ate at the Whole Foods in Berkeley. I asked him if he would also tell me one other project of his. And he was really interested in gamma ray and gamma ray bursts. I said, so how many people in the world are studying gamma rays? And he said, there was one guy in Russia and himself. That was the 2 people in the world who were studying gamma ray bursts. And he thought that was really interesting. So that is my bit on Kevin. So Kevin, wherever you are, see you later.
All right, so our next speaker is Tom Klein, who is a colleague of Kevin's. Yep. We'll do a little sound test, and then if it all sounds good to those in the back, we'll keep going. So.
Well, thank you, Janet. Do you hear me all right?
Yeah. Is that good?
Yeah. Hi, Tom.
You're all good, so.
Well, thank you. I owe you a great deal for inviting me here. I'm impressed because so far I'm the only one who's not a close family colleague, and it's a great honor. I want to assure you, Kevin was one of my closest colleagues for 4 decades. I met him, I mean, despite being always 3,000 miles apart, he and I seem to have had a lot in common, more than I even, well, some of which I didn't realize. I was so impressed by the previous speech, but talk. But I owned 50 automobiles, and I was reminded that not too many years ago, I had a Corvette and a Cadillac, but he had a Corvette and a Ferrari. He one-upped me there, but I guess he had 2 wonderful daughters and I had 3. I first came to know Kevin when he was a postdoc at Toulouse, France. In their publications, he was always buried because the names were in alphabetical order. Attia, Barat, Chambon with a C, and so on. But I came to know and greatly appreciate all his contributions. So finally, we proposed to NASA together as American and European co-principal investigators for solar polar. That was to have been 2 space probes out to Jupiter and back around the sun to do science in stereo. And then NASA canceled the American mission, to considerable horror on both continents. Kevin was left as the PI on the European mission, a responsibility he later, or fairly soon, brought back to America. His work the next several decades, if not half century almost, made him one of the outstanding scientists in the new field of transient event astronomy. As you can appreciate, this scientific arena had been historically merely the study of supernova at 1 per century, hardly even 1 per scientific career. But now with the internet and with space probes, Kevin had publications, many hundreds, and some quite fraction of which I am one of his co-authors. Studied gamma ray bursts and a variety of galactic and extragalactic phenomena, all the way up to and including the discovery in 2017 of gravitational radiation. I cannot adequately begin to describe Kevin's scientific influence. Let me instead close with my admiration of him as a man. I have known many accomplished, world-famous researchers, some of whom their manner was colored by their vain and self-centered behavior. Kevin was the opposite. As you know, an admirable gentleman, a scholar and a gentleman. And I might add, and has been hinted at, he had a sense of humor exposed rarely and only when appropriate, but always original. A truly good man. And as I used to say to my little children, one of the very goodest. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to join this lovely ceremony for Kevin. I just wanted to add one small item. I'm an astrophysics professor I teach at Clemson, South Carolina now. I got my PhD at UC Santa Cruz in the field of gamma ray burst astronomy, which at that point, when I started there, was about 10 years old. And so I came to Santa Cruz in 1983, working with Professor Woosley. And once I had decided to stay and work with him on this new field of gamma ray bursts, he made me get in touch with Kevin. And so typically every other Friday, I would take the Santa Cruz library shuttle to Berkeley and then trek up to the Space Science Lab and get exposed and work with him. He engaged me and helped me with sort of the idea of looking for optical counterparts in these error boxes that he had derived. And he had many, many occasions to be a great mentor. And I really love him for it. I just wanted to add one thing, because I heard previously from Sabine, the inspiration that he gave to her in terms of science and mathematics in particular. And there's one, and I visited the house once and I saw the cars. And I just remember one item that he mentioned to me, which I'll never forget, that he attended just about every gamma ray burst that ever happened, every gamma ray burst conference in the world. And at some point I told him, I said, man, Kevin, you're traveling so much, you're all over, you're all the time. And he says, yeah, and do you know what? My average speed is 55 miles per hour. This is the lifelong average. So he was always a scientist. He calculated the mean speed in his life. It's just, it might have been 50 miles. I don't know the exact number, but I thought this was so damn impressive. So I will miss him a lot, you guys.
Yeah, I didn't actually prepare anything, but I'm John Thompson. I'm from Space Sciences Lab. I worked with Kevin for many years. I've known him for about 20 years, and been in Space Sciences Lab since 2006. So we've worked together some for the last 15 years or so. So I was also responsible for letting the community know once we heard of Kevin's passing. And so I had many emails with people. And in the high energy community, I basically got three reactions from people. One was shocked because everybody said, I saw Kevin last month, he was fine. So everybody was really, really surprised at Kevin's passing. Second was sadness, of course. Everybody was very sad. Because Kevin was so loved in the community, in the high energy community, as you got a good feeling from Dieter and from Tom. And then third was worry, because we want to keep Kevin's work going. And he's doing some very important work, even up to the end. And so I'm also involved in helping that will continue. So anyway, I'm really glad I came today. I learned a lot about Kevin, actually. It was great to hear everybody. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you everyone via Zoom and in person for being here and sharing all these amazing memories. It's really just been so wonderful for us all to learn so much more about all the parts of Kevin that we didn't necessarily know, but it's really been so wonderful. So thank you. We're going to end the Zoom meeting now, and we're going to move on to lunch. We'll have that set up in about 5 or 10 minutes. So again, thank you all so much on behalf of the family for being here.